A single night on the road can change a lifetime. Mine did. I checked into a quiet hotel just before a storm, certain it would be nothing more than another forgettable stop between yesterday and tomorrow. But a stranger's kindness, the soft clatter of teacups, and my son's late-night call collided so perfectly that I walked out different in the morning. You might think you know what happened, but the truth is gentler, deeper, and far more surprising. Before I start, tell me in the comments from which city you're watching us. I love seeing your hometowns show up. Houston, Cleveland, Tampa, wherever you are, say hello and I'll be reading. I've been driving for hours, the kind of miles that stretch your spine and make you talk to the windshield just to hear a voice. The hotel sat back from the road like it was minding its own business, a neat brick building with a green awning and a lone bellhop cart waiting for a purpose. It smelled faintly of lemon polish inside. The sort of scent that tells you someone cared enough to wipe the banisters and straighten the magazines in the rack. I signed knock with the quick loop I've had since teaching my son to write his first letters at our kitchen table. And then I followed the carpeted hallway, small squares of navy and rust that repeated like a hymn toward my room. It was quiet in that way. Hotels are quiet. Voices tucked behind doors, ice machines humming, the distant elevator dinging like a metronome for someone else's life. I put my bag down and ran the water so hot that steam fogged the mirror, then watched the outline of my face appear like a photograph developing. 49. The number looked softer in steam. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and told my reflection the same thing I always do. You're okay, Knock. You've been through worse storms. I hadn't planned to meet anyone. I was there for a small conference the next morning. Nothing grand, just a few practical talks and a buffet breakfast with coffee that would taste like cardboard unless you drowned it in cream. I told myself I'd eat early and get back on the road by noon. That's what I told myself every time a trip made me sleep alone. Keep it simple. Keep it moving. Don't make eye contact with anything that might want you to stay. But the lobby had this bar tucked into one corner, more a lounge than a bar, really. Lamps with beige shades, a television above the counter playing a ball game with the sound low, and a bartender who looked like he could recommend tea as easily as whiskey. I thought I'd sit for a few minutes, just long enough to let my shoulders fall from around my ears. That's when I saw him. Ming. He was reading a newspaper. A real one, folded the way my father used to fold his one neat quarter on the bar. He wore a navy sport coat that had seen good days and careful hands, close-cropped silver hair, the kind that doesn't apologize for being silver, and the steady posture of a man who'd carried more than luggage in his life. He glanced up at me, not with the hunger I've come to recognize and avoid, but with a slow, courteous acknowledgement, like one traveler giving another the right of way down a narrow hall. Evening, he said, a little worn gravel in it. Evening, I answered, and took the stool 2 spaces away. That gap was my insurance policy. I could smile, finish my tea, and disappear without breaking a rhythm. What can I get you? The bartender asked. Chamomile if you have it. I smiled, adding, I'm not as fun as I look. She's being modest, Min said, eyes back on his paper, but the corner of his mouth tilted. Chamomile is high society in a cup. That was the first laugh of the night, small and honest, and it loosened my grip on the idea that being alone was the same as being safe. The tea came in a white mug with a saucer. The bartender set down honey like a peace offering. Min folded his paper with gentle hands, not the kind that fold to hide, but to make space. Passing through, he asked, Aren't we all? I said, then shook my head. Yes, conference in the morning. He nodded. I was supposed to be at one of those. I'm a contractor. They had a seminar on new building codes, but the speaker got sick, so my morning magically freed up. Min, by the way, Knock, I felt myself measuring him the way women learn to do for edges and heat and exits. Sometimes you can tell right away if a man has sharpness on the inside, the kind that cuts what it claims to protect. Min seemed built of rounded corners. You could bump into him and come away unbread. We talked about nothing at first. The game on TV, the weather stepping outside to clear its throat, the price of gas like a national riddle no one can solve. He didn't flirt in that lazy way men sometimes do, asking a question then staring at your mouth while you answer. He actually listened. When I said I was driving home the next day to beat Sunday traffic, he asked what stretch of highway I preferred and told me where the state troopers like to hide near mile marker 82. It wasn't intimate, but it was personal, and maybe those are cousins. I told him my son used to count mile markers when he was little, Back when road trips were scavenger hunts and not chores. Min smiled and asked how old my boy was now. And I said 27, living his own life, a good one, thank God, with a job that makes him wear grown-up shoes. Mine's 31, he said. Daughter bosses me from 2 states away. She'll text me to drink water like I'm a houseplant. Something easy moved between us then, the kind of ease that happens when 2 people have already survived a lot of the same weather and can recognize each other by the way they carry umbrellas. The bartender changed the channel during commercials, and we watched a hotel wedding party sweep through the lobby, sheen of satin and tight black bow ties, and a grandmother in a sequin jacket who looked like Trang's bodyguard. One of the groomsmen tossed a compliment my way as they passed. Nice smile, and then was gone. Min didn't chase it or make it a joke. He just said, "You do have a good one," and returned his eyes to the ball game like he placed a small frame around something and then allowed it to be. You can feel respect in the way a person lets you be. That's what I felt. Respect and a quiet curiosity, like we were 2 readers on the same page, pausing at the same sentence for different reasons. We drifted into deeper water without announcing it. He asked how I like traveling alone, and I told him it makes me feel competent and tender at the same time, like I'm both the driver and the person who remembers the snacks. He said he understood. He'd been widowed 5 years earlier. The word landed between us with the kind of dignity that makes you sit up straighter. I said I was divorced long enough ago that the story now folds into a tidy shape when I share it, though it used to spill everywhere. Funny, he said. How the hardest parts of our lives become the quietest once we've told them enough. It's like they get tired of shouting. We let silence do its polite work. The bartender refilled the hot water without asking. The storm finally committed to being a storm. Rain beaded on the windows and made streetlight halos. People drifted in and out of the lobby. A man dragging a suitcase like a stubborn dog. A trio of women arguing fondly over dessert. A clerk setting a small sign on the counter that sent fresh cookies at 8 p.m. The ordinary details of the world have always been my secret rescue rope. I tug on them and remember who I am. My phone buzzed on the bar and I turned it face up. My son's name lit the screen. I excused myself the way you do when your heart is your boss and you have to take the call, and moved to a quiet chair near the elevator where the wallpaper had a pattern of little leaves that looked like teardrops deciding to be brave. Hey kiddo, I said. Hey mom, you at the hotel? I told him. Yes, and spared him the weather report because he can look outside and see it there too where he lives. He told me about his day. Something at work that he'd fixed, and no one noticed. The most adult thing in the world and maybe the loneliest. He asked if I'd eaten. I said, "Ta counts as a meal if you drink it with purpose." He laughed, then got quiet. You sound lighter, he said. In a good way. There are moments with your child, even when he's grown, and maybe especially then, when his voice threads back through time, and you hear the press cooler in the man. I heard it now, the bright curiosity, the love that makes the question softer. I told him about the lounge and the ball game, the chamomile, and after a breath, the man reading the newspaper. I didn't say Min's name as if the word itself could usher in something I wasn't yet ready to greet. Is he kind? My son asked. Not is he handsome? Not do you like him? Just that. Is he kind? Yes, I said, surprised at how sure I was. He is. He took a long breath that sounded like a door opening. Mom, he said, voice steady. You don't have to keep proving you can do everything alone. Not to me, not to anyone. Rain knocked at the glass. I watched the drop lights race each other down the pane like commas learning to end a sentence. I'm okay, I said, a reflex. I know you're okay, he answered. You've always been okay. You taught me okay out of thin air and we had no business being okay. But that's not the proof I'm asking for anymore. I felt something loosen behind my ribs. Some old strap I hadn't noticed was still buckled. He kept speaking simple and clear. If a good man offers you a cup of tea or a walk in the lobby or a conversation about nothing that feels like something, he said, say yes. You have my blessing to say yes, and this matters. Dad would want that for you too. Whatever you think you owe to the past, you've paid it in full. I closed my eyes and behind them, I saw 100 old afternoons. Me packing school lunches, me checking homework for smudged math. Me teaching him to parallel park in the church lot at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday while laughing so hard we cried. The past wasn't a debt. It was a garden. Somewhere in all those rows I'd accidentally planted this night. Okay, I said, and it wasn't the defensive kind. It was the kind that answers the door and lets the evening in. We said goodnight the way we do. No fuss, just the quiet code of people who know they can call again in 5 minutes if a thought returns with urgency. I put the phone down, and for a moment I let the elevator's mirrored panel hold me. My face looked less like a plan and more like a possibility. When I returned to the bar, the chair beside Min was still empty, like it had been saving a seat for the part of me that hadn't yet arrived. "All well?" he asked, lifting his mug the way he'd raise a hand in a church pew. "Better than well," I said, and slid into the space I'd left between us, close enough to be present, far enough to keep a promise to myself. "My son says I can accept chamomile from a gentleman and still be a responsible adult." Min smiled in a way that made time feel like a calm river instead of a rushing highway. "Smart son." "He is," I said, "smarter than I am most days." We didn't pounce on the moment. We let it stand between us like a small table holding the light. He didn't rush to tell me his history, and I didn't start listing favorites to avoid the deeper questions. We went back to the game for a while. We watched a slow-motion replay of an outfielder making an impossible catch, glove reaching into the dark like a prayer answered. When the commercial came, Min finally turned to me fully, elbows off the bar, the paper abandoned like a solved puzzle. "Knock," he said. "I was about to ask for a refill on hot water. If you'd like, we could take our cups to the lobby and listen to the storm for a few minutes." Nothing more required than the listening. I thought of my son's words. I thought of how kindness needs a witness the way a song needs a listener. I thought of how long I'd lived with my shoulders up, braced for the moment I'd have to carry more than my share. I could feel the old reflex the way a muscle remembers the weight of an old bag. But the strap behind my ribs was looser now. "I'd like that," I said. We carried our mugs to 2 chairs near the window. The storm put on a show. Wind shouldering the glass, rain stitching the parking lot into a shining quilt. Min didn't fill the air with talk. He let the sound do what sound does. After a few minutes, he told me about a porch he'd built for a woman who'd lived in her house 60 years and wanted for her last summers, a place to sit where the light fell just right. He said it as if it were a prayer he'd been allowed to answer with wood and patience. "Do you ever wish," I asked, "that someone would build you a place like that, measured to your exact needs? No one size fits most, just you." "Sometimes," he said. "Then I remember I know how to use a level and I can make a decent guess. But it is nice when someone brings lemonade while you're working." We laughed softly, the kind of laugh that doesn't alert the front desk. The television back at the bar clicked into post-game highlights, a parade of effort and luck. Somewhere down the hall, a door thudded it shut, followed by a muffled apology. The world went on doing what it does, oblivious to how a pair of conversations had rearranged my future with the tact of a well-trained bellhop. At some point the bartender set 2 oatmeal cookies on a plate by our chairs without interrupting. Min broke one in half and held a piece out to me with both hands like it was an offering and not a transaction. I took it. The cinnamon tasted like being 12 and safe, and for a second I nearly put my face in my hands, not from sadness but from relief. He pretended not to see the way my breath hitched. That kindness might be the thing that did it. The way he let me have my moment privately in public. When the storm eased, we stood. It was later than I realized. Sleep called with its old-fashioned courtesy. "Thank you," I said, and I meant for the tea, the silence, the cookies, the not asking for more than I was ready to give. "For the company." "Likewise," he said. "If the morning finds you at the buffet and you want to argue about whether scrambled eggs at hotels are a lost cause, I'll be the guy hunting for real butter." I smiled. "I'll be the woman looking for the fruit that tastes like it came from a tree, and not a catalog." We didn't exchange numbers. We didn't make promises. We let the night hold what it had made, the way a good craftsman knows when not to sand any further. In the elevator, I saw our reflection shoulder to shoulder. Both of us looking forward, not at each other, like people who trust the next floor will be there when the doors slide open. In my room, I turned off the lamp and sat on the edge of the bed while my eyes learned the shapes of the dark. The chair by the window, the square of lighter black, that was the curtain's gap, the handle of my suitcase catching a stray light like a wink. My phone rested face down on the table. I knew that if I turned it over, I'd see a text from my son. "You got this." I didn't need to see it to believe it. "Here's what I can tell you with certainty. Sometimes the most unexpected, most profoundly consensual thing you can do is agree to receive what you've spent years denying yourself, not because you were unworthy, but because you were busy proving you could go without. Sometimes the bravest way to love your child is to let him see you choose gentleness for yourself. And sometimes a hotel on a rainy Thursday becomes the doorway you didn't know you were looking for. The one that opens onto a porch built exactly to the measurements of your next life. I lay back and listened to the last raindrops ticking like a distant clock. Morning would bring coffee and the buffet and the clatter of polite conversation. Maybe I'd see men buy the jam packets. Maybe I wouldn't. Either way, something had already changed permanently and quietly, as if a carpenter had come while I was out and leveled the floor beneath me. I didn't need the whole plan. I only needed what my son had given me. A few strong words steady as a beam, strong enough to hold the roof of what might come next. The morning light came slow, seeping through the heavy hotel curtains like someone pulling back the years one thin layer at a time. I woke earlier than usual, maybe because my body knew the day wasn't like others. For a moment I lay still, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, the shuffle of someone rolling the suitcase down the hall, the faint rhythm of rain still dripping from the gutters outside. It was the sound of travel, of pauses, of people moving from one chapter of their lives to the next without realizing it. And in that quiet, I thought again of Min, of his steady eyes and the unhurried way he carried himself, and of my son's voice echoing in me. You don't have to prove you can do everything alone. I slipped on the hotel robe, the kind that never fits quite right, and made tea with the small packets on the counter. It tasted like dust and determination, but it was warm. In the mirror, my face looked softer than it had the night before, as if rest and permission had taken away a layer of weight. I wondered how many women my age sat in hotel rooms across the country at that same moment, sipping bad tea, half listening to their own doubts. We are everywhere, I thought, holding the world together in quiet ways no one applauds. And sometimes maybe we deserve more than survival. We deserve to be seen. By the time I dressed and stepped into the hallway, the hotel was alive. Voices spilled from open doors. A child tugged a rolling bag like it weighed more than his small body. A man in a suit talked too loudly on his phone, promising deals before he even had coffee. I followed the smell of toast and bacon to the breakfast room. There it was, just as Min had predicted. Scrambled eggs that looked defeated, bowls of fruit cut too perfectly, and packets of jam stacked like poker chips. He was already there, tray in hand, studying the bread station with mock seriousness. When he saw me, he lifted one brow, the smallest smile pulling at his lips. "They have real butter," he said, pointing as if he'd discovered treasure. I laughed. "Then this day is already a success." We sat near the window, where the glass was still strewn with rain from the night before. Outside the parking lot gleamed in puddles, cars pulling in and out like players in a slow dance. Inside, the smell of coffee clung to everything. Min poured me a cup without asking, sliding the sugar packets my way. He didn't make it feel like a gesture that demanded repayment, just a simple act of decency that more than anything kept me seated across from him when my old reflex wanted me to retreat. We talked about ordinary things first. He told me about a bridge project he'd worked on years ago. How people never think about the men who pour concrete and measure angles until the day they drive across without fear. I told him about the first time I dropped my son off at college, how the silence in the car on the way home had been louder than any music I might have played. He listened, not nodding for show, but really listening, his gaze steady and kind. And somewhere between bites of toast and sips of coffee, the conversation shifted. We weren't just two travelers killing time anymore. We were two people standing at the edge of something unexpected. Not naming it yet, but letting it breathe between us. He asked about my son, and I told him more about how strong he'd been during my divorce, how he carried more than a boy should carry, how he was the reason I'd learned to push through loneliness with a kind of iron will. Min nodded, then said something that struck me hard. "Maybe he's strong now because you showed him what resilience looks like. But resilience doesn't mean you should always be alone, knock. Sometimes resilience is letting someone walk beside you." It was such a simple truth, but I felt it sink deep, like a seed finding the exact place to grow. For years, I'd been so focused on proving independence that I forgot companionship wasn't weakness. My son had reminded me last night. Min was showing me now. We finished breakfast slowly, neither of us eager to rush away. The morning crowd thinned, people hurrying to their plans, their meetings, their next destinations. We lingered, two strangers who suddenly weren't strangers at all. When we finally stood, Min asked if I had time before my conference. I did, more than I needed if I was honest. He suggested a short walk, the kind you take just to stretch your legs and see how the world looks after a storm. Outside the air smelled clean like the night had scrubbed it fresh. Puddles mirrored the sky and the grass sparkled with droplets. We walked side by side, not touching, not needing to. Conversation flowed easily, but so did the silences, and that told me more than words ever could. Comfort without pressure, presence without demand. At one point he stopped near a small bench beneath a maple tree. The leaves were still dripping, the wood dark with water. "You ever notice," he said, "how the world looks different after rain, not just cleaner? Changed, like it's showing you a version of itself you wouldn't see otherwise." I nodded. "I feel like that's me right now. Changed just a little." He looked at me, then really looked, and for a moment I let myself hold his gaze. There was no urgency in it, no rush to claim or control, just steady recognition, respect, and something else too, something tender that felt safe. We didn't stay on that bench long. We walked back slowly, returning to the hotel with the ease of people who know they'll remember this morning, even years later. In the lobby, as guests checked out and clerks shuffled papers, turned to me. "Knock," he said, "I don't know if our paths will cross again after today, but I'm glad they did now." "More than glad." "Me too," I answered. And I meant it, every word. We shook hands then like travelers, but held on just a second longer than necessary. Not romantic, not rushed. Just enough to acknowledge that something real had happened between two people who weren't looking for it, but didn't turn away when it arrived. Later, as I drove down the highway, the miles rolling beneath me, I thought about my son's words again. "You don't have to prove you can do everything alone." He was right. That night in the hotel, that morning with Min, I'd learned that accepting kindness doesn't erase your strength, completes it. And maybe, just maybe, life still had rooms left for me to enter, doors still waiting to be opened. The rain had cleared, the sun breaking through in bright shards, the kind that made the road shimmer ahead. I didn't know where this new understanding would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was curious. I was ready. And I was grateful for the hotel, for Min, for my son, and for the reminder that it's never too late to let life surprise you with gentleness.